When we think of motivation, we often think of successful people. Super athletes, celebrities, and entrepreneurs are just a few examples. But psychologists have found that motivation is not reserved for overachievers. It's at work in the life of every individual.
Motivation refers to the forces that act on or within an individual to trigger behavior. And psychologists study motivation as a way to understand why people do what they do, what causes one person to act in a situation and another not to. And the idea there is that something different must be motivating these two people. They use the concept of motivation to account for, the difference between presenting a stimulus to one person versus another and the different behaviors that you get in response.
Exploring the inner workings of motivation goes a long way toward helping us answer the question that is at the heart of psychology. Why do people behave as they do? As motivation researchers have discovered, sometimes the answer to that question is obvious. And sometimes it's not. For instance, how does one explain the motivations of a self-avowed ice cream fanatic who decides to become a marathon runner?
I think I'll have a little sundae here. Well, maybe not too little. 4.5 years ago, my wife and I opened up a Dairy Queen, and that's where we wind up spending a lot of our time. Oh, maybe a little more. And some pecans. How about some pecans? Yeah, I like pecans. This is one of the things that makes owning a Dairy Queen so wonderful. What prompted me to get into physical shape came back in 1988. A friend of mine got married, Michael White, and when we were looking over the wedding pictures, I saw myself, and at the time I was 41 pounds overweight. So for my New Year's resolution, beginning in 1989, was that I was going to lose most of that weight.
Chuck's desire to change the way he looked energized him to take action. Psychologists categorize activation as one of the 3 basic characteristics of motivation, along with persistence and intensity.
There are 3 characteristics to, general characteristics to motivation. One of them is activation. Motivation activates behavior. You see the activation in the production of behavior. Another one is persistence. The motivated organism will persist in trying to achieve a particular behavior or a goal. And the final is the intensity. We tend to think that more intense behaviors are more motivated behaviors.
Activation as a principle of motivation is usually, it assumes that you're inactive. You're asleep, you're not doing anything. You think of a hungry organism. He's sitting there asleep in the den. There's a period of deprivation of no food, gets up and does something. So that's activation. He's energized. The animal's energized to do something.
I joined a gym, and I started running every other day, just for fitness and to build my strength. After a while, the 15 minutes, was too easy, and so I started extending the time, about maybe 5 minutes every week, did a couple more laps, until the point where I was worked up to about 10 miles a day. At that point, I started figuring, well, there was a little 10K race, which is 6.2 miles, in the neighborhood here in Cyprus, and so I decided to sign up for it just to see what I could do. My goal was to do it in 40 minutes or less, and I wound up doing it in 38 minutes, which I was very pleased with.
Persistence of behavior is another indicator of motivation. How long will you work at it? Say you're working at a task in an achievement setting, and it's very difficult. How long will you work at it until you solve it? So that's an indicator of motivation.
So from there, I started entering a bunch of other smaller races in the neighborhood, same thing, 10Ks, 8Ks, things like that. I started thinking, I had a couple friends that, had talked about running marathons. And when they told me about it, I thought they were crazy, 26.2 miles. That's a long way to drive, let alone, to run. But after my running progressed to the point where, an hour and a half was easy, I thought, I could do that.
Motivation is also characterized by intensity. The desire to run a marathon caused Chuck to train hard for a race that seemed impossible only a few months before.
There they go!
And in the history of motivation, there's 2 main contexts to study it. One is a hungry animal, typically a rat running down a straight alleyway, and the second would be someone in an achievement context working at a task. I want to determine if this person is motivated. Is the rat motivated? Is the person motivated? How do I do that? One thing that tells me is, for example, how fast does the rat run down the alleyway? So the hungrier the animal is, the faster he'll run. And in a similar light, the more the person wants to achieve, the harder they'll work.
Recognizing the characteristics of motivation is one thing. Explaining how we become motivated is a little more difficult. Early psychologists attempted to explain motivation with biologically based instinct theories. Instincts, complex patterns of unlearned behaviors, are easy to identify in animals. They are most often associated with biological needs, such as hunting and mating.
Large onion rings. That'll be all for you today?
Humans certainly possess some basic biological drives, such as the need for food. But they also exhibit behavior that does not seem to satisfy any biological drive.
Well, instinct theories are one of the first approaches to motivation, and when you say, why does someone do something, you'd say, well, they have an instinct to do it. And of course, that explanation was not very explanatory. It was almost circular. The person does it, therefore they have an instinct to do it. And there was a funny little saying that something like, John Jones twiddles his thumb, he must have a twiddling thumb instinct.
8 miles.
As the drawbacks of instinctual theories became clear, psychologists searched for a better way to explain motivation. This led to the development of drive theories.
Drive theories capture some of the factors that push behaviors. The basic idea in a drive theory is that we have some unmet biological need. And that unmet biological need, whether it's thirst or hunger, triggers an internal drive. And it's that drive that motivates us to satisfy that need in some way.
As our biological needs are met, we reach a point of balance that drive theorists refer to as homeostasis.
Homeostasis is a tendency for the organism to remain in a state of equilibrium or balance, so that, for example, when you're hot, you automatically sweat. This now maintains the body temperature at a level of equilibrium. There are different principles of homeostasis. Some are that the optimal level of equilibrium is 0. So I'm hungry, I eat, and I go back to a 0 state of need. Anytime the body detects a difference between my ideal state, what I want, and my present state, if the body detects a difference, then I'm out of equilibrium. I'm out of balance. I do something to bring that back into balance. I just go back to a 0 need state.
The drawback to drive theories is that many of our behaviors don't seem to be connected to, some internal unmet biological need. There are behaviors like curiosity, play, exploration. There's really, that we know of, not an unmet biological need there. I mean, the behavior seems to be motivated by some other factor. There's also, external goals and incentives and rewards that drive behavior also. So the drive theories are very useful, but they also have their limitations because there are many behaviors that the drive theories simply can't account for.